my name's Sarah Mackintosh. I'm very happy to be moderating this panel today. You'll see the QR code behind me. Please do scan it and send us any questions for the end, and I'll go through them and put them to the panel. So we're going to start today with brief introductions, and then we'll get into it. Philippa, can I come to you first?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Stop pouring my water. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Philippa Oldham. I'm Stakeholder Engagement Director at the Advanced Propulsion Centre. For those of you who don't know, the Advanced Propulsion Centre formed in 2013 as a joint initiative out of the Automotive Council between the government and industry, and our role is to transition the automotive sector towards net zero, so support the supply chain, anchor R&D development, and also support with capital investment as we also deliver the Automotive Transformation Fund on behalf of the government. My background is I'm a chartered mechanical engineer, and I've got a wealth of experience from the motorsport sector into the defence sector, and then an aerospace, and then finally back into automotive.
Thank you. Martin.
Yeah, well, welcome everyone. Great to be here today. First observation, what an amazing venue. But I guess I'll get on to the introduction. So Martin Wood, Chief Advisor to the Office for Investment. The Office for Investment sits between the Department for Business and Trade and Number 10 and works on the most strategic investments in the net zero space, hence the interest today. My background is also engineering. I'm from the private sector, work for Ford Motor Company and other companies. So thanks for the kind invite today.
Hi and good afternoon everyone. My name is Richard Hill. I'm from NatWest. I'm the sector head for mobility and logistics. That pretty much covers everything transport related, automotive, aviation, shipping and land transport and logistics. It's a very significant sector for NatWest Group and has been for a long time, and it's key in and around our strategies going forward, particularly around the climate aspects, which is a really important part. My background is actually automotive. I actually wasn't Ford. I started life out in Rover Group and BMW in Mannheim, and really in the last 10 years been focusing in the bank around sort of how, from a sector point of view, we can support our clients through an unprecedented change of transition, really. So great to be here, and it looks like a great event.
Thank you. Alex.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. My name is Alex Veitch. I'm the Director of Policy and Insight at the British Chambers of Commerce. If you haven't come across the British Chambers before, we are... I'm getting a sign that the mic's not working. Is that a bit better? Fantastic. Thanks to my colleague Ben there for doing the secret signal. We are a network of independent business associations and places all across the UK and all over the world. Wherever you go, there will typically be a British Chamber, and we work on policy issues around enabling the transition to net zero, as well as diving into some of the sector specifics, which we'll talk about today. My background is in industry and then interest groups, mainly around transport logistics over the years, UK, US, internationally and in Brussels, and so it's really interesting to bring those perspectives today, and thank you for having me on the panel.
Great, thank you. Richard, I'd like to come to you first, and can you talk to us a bit more about the size and the scale of the sector and the opportunities that you see in front of us?
Well, size in terms of, I could put some numbers on it, but it's both UK and globally, it runs into hundreds of billions, trillions. The opportunity is enormous. The interesting part, I think, is it's not all geared around, it shouldn't be all geared around just ICE to EV. That is a really important part and a huge element of decarbonising through to 2050. But it goes well beyond that, and we're going to need to see lots of new modes of transport coming through. One area I'd call out is sort of transition around micromobility, and that will bring a lot of innovation around that. It's starting to see it already. Last mile delivery, and sort of also supports the critically important part, and that is active travel, which is often forgot within this transition. But in addition to different modes, there's also new technologies coming along. The need for autonomous and connected vehicles is developing at pace. There's new systems coming along also that feed into what ultimately we do need, and we need to have at the end of the day, is a new infrastructure, both within towns and cities, to support an enormous shift, transition towards net zero from a transport point of view, for sure. So road transport is a very, very key part, and ICE to EV is a major component of that. But of course, there are lots of other elements of transport, rail and light rail coming through, and aviation and shipping, all represented here today. So it's superb to see that. So the scale is unprecedented, and we've just looked at cars alone, which there tends to be an over-focus on, I think, to a certain degree. You've probably not seen a change since the advent of the combustion engine circa 150 years ago. So you can put any numbers on it you like. The opportunity, the transition opportunity is enormous, and I think we should all be here to support that in whatever shape or form.
Great, thank you. Martin, I want to come to you next. I'm interested, obviously you're from the Office of Investment, so I'm interested in the sort of government view of the sector, and I'm also interested to hear a bit more about investment over the last couple of years. Are you seeing people capitalising on the scale of this opportunity?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I mean, as we look at the UK economy, the auto sector, which encompasses cars, light commercial vehicles, trucks, buses, a very, very diverse sector, employs a couple of 100,000 in R&D and manufacturing. The sector has a value of 70 to 80 billion. It's predominantly export, so it brings in a lot of foreign currency. So it's very vital to the overall industrial landscape of the UK economy. Also contributes around 10% of R&D. So it's very much central to government plans around industrial innovation. And as Richard's just said, this transition is a once in 100, 150 year game, and it's all to play for. And certainly last year we saw an extraordinary amount of investment from the industry, well over 20 billion, by a lot of household names, but also some emerging names. For example, Agritas, new company name, 40 gigawatt hour battery facility, 3 to 4 billion investment, several thousand jobs. So, a really good story. And government is really firmly behind and alongside those investors as they look to invest to help de-risk and to help deliver the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges as you move from a hydrocarbon-based economy to a renewable energy or renewable electricity-based economy. The work for the grid is quite extraordinary. So there's some help that we can offer. But yeah, I think we're in good shape, albeit we had to some extent a bit of a slow start, and we're a little bit in catch-up, if I'm entirely honest.
Okay, that's interesting. And clearly, we're doing stuff here, but everybody else is across the world as well. Alex, if I can come to you, and how do you think the UK is faring when we're compared to sort of countries such as China, Germany, who are also accelerating at pace?
Yeah, thank you very much. And this time I will check again. Can you? So I think what I wanted to say flows on quite to Chambers of Commerce, very involved in encouraging inward investment in the UK, also helping UK-based.
Oh, you
can
just dropped out a little
this is
bit.
Not working at all. Okay, let's try that again. Old school. Thank you very much. I'll start again. So what I was going to say is, I think what what I'm going to say flows quite well from what Martin said. So the chambers are involved in both attracting inward investment and also helping UK-based businesses grow and stay and thrive here. We work a lot here at the British Chambers on the enablers. So to help the UK be more competitive in the round across sectors, and this was mentioned in the previous session here, we need quicker planning decisions. What we want to see is not so much a revamp of all the planning rules, but actually more resource in planning authorities. We hear that from businesses everywhere in every sector. We're working on that with some of our partners to actually build that directly. Building on something called the Harrington Review, which we endorsed in our own report on this earlier this year. We want to see the growth of Office for Investment. We want to see real cross-government focus on inward investment. It was brilliant to see the Agritas gigafactory. Our Somerset chamber is very involved in that. It's also brilliant to see development of the lithium economy in Cornwall. Again, Cornwall Chamber's really involved in that as well. I think it's fair to say some of those inward investments haven't landed, and we need to understand why and what we can do our end to help with that. So making the UK more competitive for various sectors will also help this sector as well, but we have to look at the macro stuff, and that's really where we focus. I want to say a little bit about the sector. This is a sector I've worked in on and off for well over 20 years, and one of my earlier jobs was at the Energy Saving Trust in the 2000s, and I think if you'd have told us then that we'd be having such a high proportion of sales EVs in the UK, I think we would have given you a slightly weird look. But at the time we had the G-Whiz car, famously driven by Alan Rusbridger, the editor of The Guardian, and that was the sort of one EV. And now you've finally got supply matching demand. You've got really cool cars that can compete on their merits, but do need some support. And so I think that UK is a big market. It's looking at the IEA figures to prep for this. We're the second biggest market in Europe after Germany, but we're quite a long way behind Germany. And we are behind China and the US on volume, I believe, or perhaps bigger than the US. But the next step is really all important. And there are two big sort of strategic challenges here. One is about trade and domestic production. And the other is about critical minerals. So just a brief point on both of those things, because they're both very topical. So you'll all know, I'm sure, the EU's considering trade remedies, as they say, about imports of Chinese-made EVs. As far as I'm aware, there's not currently a case open at our own trade remedies body here in the UK. But I think it's really important that if the industry is concerned, that they go through the formal structures. We do have the Trade Remedies Authority. There is a formal process to go to assess if there is unfair competition, and we have to work in that rules-based process, and we'll lead where that follows. But I think it's tricky because we're trying to balance the need to transition to net zero and have products for consumers with the need to quite rightly look at domestic production. But that is one to watch for sure. And I think on critical minerals, there is geopolitics here. There is impacts of the Ukraine war and a lack of perhaps access to some of these minerals. It's really good to see the government launch its critical minerals strategy. We're very pleased to be on the critical minerals task force that's been set up. And I've mentioned Cornwall already about lithium, and can we find a way to increase our security, increase our onshoring of production where that's possible. And I'll just finish with this, and this was mentioned in the last session too. Is there a move beyond some of these critical minerals? Are there technologies that can perhaps ease the reliance on some of these critical minerals in the future? I'm not an expert on those technologies, but I think that would be another thing that we need to talk about as well. So I think we're set fair, but there's some big challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. You started to touch on quite a few different challenges there. Maybe, Philippa, if I can bring you in to talk a bit more about what you're sort of seeing coming down the road.
Yeah, definitely. And actually building on, a few of the other things, people have talked about supply chain resilience. I mean, that was obviously something that we all became very aware of during the pandemic situation, and actually building on the lithium thing. The real positivity there actually is the UK story about collaboration, and it's great, we've got Green Lithium here, Cornish Lithium have been mentioned, Weardale Lithium, and actually what you're seeing from those organisations within the UK is the sharing of knowledge and data and how they're researching, what they're doing in terms of extraction, because actually they see an opportunity for all of them. There's a piece of the cake for all of them. So actually they recognise the speed at which they can get to market with their products is actually beneficial for the whole of the UK. So that's a really positive story. And like Martin said, this is, unprecedented change in what we're doing with all of these new technologies, whether it be in the battery side of things, and I know hydrogen was also touched on previously, but again, what do we have in the UK and where can we build it? And again, conferences are great like this in terms of bringing forward those innovative companies, and actually there's a number of, we have a technology developer accelerator startup program which actually really supports some of those businesses, and there's a couple here I've been walking around, and Brill Power here who do a battery management system, so that looks about the improvement of the operation in the vehicle system, and actually that's something that we really need to push for to make sure that the vehicles are being developed. But Also, when we look at the UK's land base, we actually, or automotive sector, we produced, we're back up to 1 million vehicles last year, passenger car and commercial vehicles. But we've also got to remember that, 80% of our market is really exported, so making sure that we are competitive with Europe, and with the work that Martin and his team do alongside our team with the Automotive Transformation Fund about really anchoring manufacturing facilities and that supply chain here to then export to other countries in Europe is something that we need to do. But also helping the existing incumbents like Ford, for example, transition their transmission plant in Halewood to actually make electric drive units. So, how do we make sure we retain the skills, retain those businesses, and really sort of anchor that future supply chain? Just to touch on Alex's point as well about the UK being a very innovative place and a cross-sectorial place, there was a company, there is a company called Equipmate based in Norwich, and they initially had an APC project working with Ariel, who make high-performance vehicles, developing an electric drive unit. And actually that system that is high performance, they're not going to sell many of those vehicles, has actually now transitioned into the bus market and into the maritime market. Actually, what you're seeing is the growth of these businesses into multiple sectors, which is really a positive story for the UK innovation landscape.
Great, thanks. And if I come to you, Richard, do you agree with all that? Are there more you would add to the challenges front?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Philippa touched on the accelerator, the APC run. We NatWest, in collaboration with Warwick Manufacturing Group, established a clean transport accelerator 18 months ago, really to help, I would say startups, but young businesses who have got some fantastic forms of innovation, to help them plug into our existing accelerator, general accelerator, along with the technical support they can get from Warwick Manufacturing and the Advanced Propulsion Centre. They're all based together. And that kind of help and support, this whole event is around, centred around innovation, which is absolutely critical to supporting what I think the UK will be in and around the automotive and wider transport sector. So that innovation piece and supporting businesses through that, it goes beyond funding. I think the government do a great job in funding innovation. The scale-up bit is another challenge in its own right, but helping businesses become investment ready is a really important part. And the Clean Transport Accelerator, is working. We've seen so many different types of businesses and innovations come through that in the last 18 months. It's really encouraging, I think, for the UK.
Great. And Martin, do you think government is aligned on all of the different challenges, and do you think government and the sector are working well together to address things?
Well, I think we stand at a time where UK Gov's just released Auto 2030, which is unprecedented support as part of a £4.5 billion manufacturing plan. I'm a manufacturing guy, so it's music to my ears, to be quite candid, and it's something you can really get behind and believe in. So I think the support is there. I think the vision is there. We've already heard the critical minerals strategy mentioned. It is about building resilience. It's about hedging your bets. It's about working with, let's say, friendly nations where you've got open markets. And going back to the lithium comment that Alex mentioned, we've got an opportunity here, well, frankly, an expectation to be a lithium exporter. With the amount of lithium reserves we've got and the scale of the lithium refining projects, we can really, we can provide lithium to many different opportunities across Europe. And again, government is strongly behind those opportunities, and Philippa's own organisation has supported at least Cornish Lithium and Emirates British Lithium in their scale-up work. So that scale-up, finance de-risking is vitally important as we move into new sectors. And I think something that people won't know about is the Auto Council, which is co-chaired by government and the industry. It was set up in around 2008-9 at the time of that particular financial crash. And that really is an exemplar of government and industry working together. And I've sat on both sides of that as an industry partner and now as a government partner. and really it's demonstrable, the excellent collaboration. Of course, government can always do more, right? But I genuinely think we're in a really good place right now.
Great, okay, thanks. And Philippa, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about how your centre supports these types of innovations and how you choose which ones to talk to.
Yeah, well, everything's a competitive process, obviously. So there's a number of different funding opportunities that we have. So we have collaborative research and development. So their projects, we'll have a call open for that later in the year. But they are projects can get up to £20 million of grant in project, and actually they are for the transition of the propulsion system. So everything, as I talked about, some of the examples of EDUs. We've also had an example, just to touch on I know we touched on the low carbon fuels and sustainable fuels previously. We supported New Holland with their tractor running on biomethane, so that's working with, again, a startup from Cornham and Benneman who are extracting the methane off cow slurry. And actually, so
wow.
Again, it's a more understanding what your feedstocks are and your waste feedstocks are and how you use them. So really focused around the technology side of things. We also have just closed today actually our ARMED 3 project, which is an advanced route to market demonstrator. So again, these are companies and actually bring in a number of the SMEs to then demonstrate their technology on a platform to really see how it would work in the market, and they're always put on display at the Cenex Expo show later in the year. So again, people can really see what an impact those vehicles are having. And we've seen great growth from companies such as MPEL, which was a startup, say, I think about 5 years ago, and now is sort of in Ford's supply chain. So, great relationship with an OEM built through that program. I've touched on the Technology Developer Accelerator Program, so that's quite different in terms of an accelerator program, because not only does it provide the business mentoring and the financial support to develop the technology, it also helps businesses structure their leadership team, protect their own IP, and also look at how they really pitch their investor activity. And actually we had an investor pitching session last night actually that went down very well, which is great. And that's about forming the network as well. And then the last thing, probably from a funding perspective, is the Automotive Transformation Fund. And so this was where the recognition between ourselves, industry and government this launched in 2020, about the fact of what can you really do to get the public investment to really mobilise that private investment. And so, through that we've seen real investment through the AESC Gigafactory up in Sunderland, linked with Nissan. Martin's obviously already touched on the Agratas investment. I touched on the Ford Halewood. So those really big investments that, a small proportion is public money, and the rest is done through private investment. But not only that, we do a scale-up readiness validation piece, which again, is the work we talked about with some of the lithium companies about, doing those feasibility studies about creating a pilot line. What is the opportunity? What have they extracted? What do they need to improve that and scale at, a fast pace? So that's having a real impact. Separate to funding, though, and probably also worth mentioning, is we also produce insight reports and are currently authoring the roadmaps for the sector. So the roadmaps are used as strategic documents both within government, within industry, and actually help with that strategy development. So they cross the technologies, and then also this year are looking at the whole system, so the mobilisation of people and the mobilisation of goods. And they look out to 2050 and really look at where those technology opportunities are and where there are gaps potentially that we need to be highlighting and investing in. Likewise, I think we do quarterly demand data, so looking at how do we really meet that demand of 90 gigawatt hours that we're expecting to need in the future, and actually where we are in the projection of both demand of different materials, different batteries, in terms of the UK, Europe and the world. So it's a global perspective and how we can meet those demands. So again, those sort of documents and insights that we produce, we can talk to you more and help your companies develop those strategic opportunities, but they will also help businesses creating some of those engagement with the investment that they need with their communities, and also help them maybe in government discussions as well.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like these public-private partnerships are just really, really important, possibly even a unique selling point to the UK. I don't know, we can come back to that question. But Alex, maybe if I can turn to you to talk a bit more about the importance of these types of relationships.
Yeah, thank you. So I think so much has been said about the innovation space, and I do think we should acknowledge that it is a positive story to tell, government support for innovation. That is absolutely right. And I think everyone talks a lot about the US Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
You know, that's a very significant policy intervention to combine, you know, onshoring of production with sort of green innovation. And I think we can't match the fiscal firepower of the US or the EU, but nevertheless, we are brilliant at green innovation. I must give a plug to one of our chambers here, is on our stand at H80, East Lancashire Chamber. They set up a green innovation funding system to support that. So now what I hear a bit talking to people is, are we as good at the scale up and the mass market?
Yeah.
Now we have a pretty good sized domestic economy, but of course we have to be an export market. It's really interesting to hear Philippa talk about exports, because one thing we have seen in the UK after Brexit is our exports haven't grown as fast as our European neighbours, and we do want to see some improvements to the trade and cooperation agreement to facilitate British exports across the piece, especially for SMEs who've made it more difficult. So, but what I just want to leave the audience with perhaps is a thought about making markets, because the transformation to green innovation at scale does involve intervention to correct market failures. Climate change can be seen as a market failure because we don't value the impact of greenhouse gases, just to bring it right back. And I'll never forget, I was at a round table in the 2000s when the government were bringing in the renewable transport fuel obligation, and the minister said, look, we're just taking a breath because we are about to make a market. And it's this government, it gets a lot of criticism, but they have made markets in a really ambitious way, including for zero emission vehicles. And so there will always be a kind of Goldilocks porridge moment or a seesaw moment about where is the especially when it's a sales-based target like the zero emission vehicle mandate, where's that perfect moment where it's a stretch enough for the industry but it's not too much where it perhaps leads to production being taken elsewhere. That's really hard. But what we call out in our report we published in January about green innovation is that when government is making a market and it is getting to a retail end and it is talking about customers having to look at buying a heat pump or choosing an EV because that's what's being made, we really want them to get up and support it and be unafraid to champion the policy and the market they have created. So that communication piece to back it up is super, super important. And I think we must remember, we need government to make markets and incentivise green products. That is how we make them into mass market, and that's how we scale up market because of this whole market failure issue.
This might be a mean question. I'm putting you slightly on the spot, but given you talked about government's role in making markets, what's your view of the impact of the change in the targets that happened last year?
With the phase out of the ICs. Well, look, you're talking to someone here who's worked on this a long time, right? So I started off working on fuel economy standards in the USA when I was young, a lot younger than I am now. I worked right through the European approach to this, the 2000s. I've worked through when LPG was a thing and alternative fuels. So, and I've been out of this space for 2 years, working at the BCC, and I look back and think, my goodness me, this has grown so much. So I think it's easy to knock the government for pushing that back. We took a bit more of a balanced view. If you look at the zero emission vehicle market, the industry has. I'm not speaking here for the car industry. They've made some points recently about how challenging that is, and that should be listened to. So I don't think we should be in the business of saying the government's always wrong for changing its mind. We should be in the business of saying this is an historic market transformation to an EV market, which I almost thought I'd never see this, honestly, in my working life. And if there are deviations, because the prize will be met, that's right. But we're now seeing, like I said before,
how challenging this target's going to be. And again, we should be there with the government to say, be brave enough to support it now. Because now it's the hard yards where people's buying choices are going to change, because we're making a market for the good of the climate and for future generations.
Great, thank you. And Richard, can I come to you on this sort of public-private partnership question and sort of the role it's played for you?
Sure. I'll just pick up on the various points that have been said.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the word partnership. Collaboration is absolutely key. I mean, this is a monumental change.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier on, this is not, it's just not an ICE to EV scenario. It's a big, big part of it. There are lots of other components on how, if you go to 2050 as an exercise and backcast from there, so you imagine what 2050 looks like. This is people living and working in a very different way, as we are today to what we were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So exponentially move that out to 2050. The collaborative support needs to focus on a whole solution and involves lots and lots of different partners, government, private, public. And it has to be, I guess the challenge is it sort of has to be done at pace, because it is being done at pace elsewhere in the world. And that's probably where the tension point is in this country. We need to keep up with the economies, because we've got the skills, we've got the creative flair, and we mustn't lose that advantage in a global lesson, particularly around the scale-up piece. That's the gap I feel at the moment the UK is struggling with, is the scale-up element. So Martin mentioned the sort of collaboration that goes on with the UK Automotive Council. I, as somebody from the banking world, has been on that for 14 years now, and you know the challenge comes both ways, and it works really well. We work very closely with the APC and the High Value Manufacturing Catapult and things like that. And we're bringing lots of new products to market. So the financial services world, and there's a big element of that here today, is changing at pace as well. I mean, one of the things we just recently brought to market to help that is something where we can leverage IP, which there's trillions of intellectual property assets on balance sheets, and we bring in that kind of thing to the market.
Yeah.
to help move it all forward. But it's just a huge collaboration piece where any old rule book is gone out the window. We all have to sort of get around the table on this.
Thank you. Martin, I want to come to you because you talked earlier about the level of investment. We've had record levels of investment in the sector, and we've heard about our successes, and that's partly down to the sort of public-private partnership nature of what's been happening. But how do we keep that level of investment coming in? How do we keep our progress going? And what's our unique selling point as the UK that means that people are going to want to keep investing here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah, and a question I've been asked by ministers actually, because they obviously saw a precedent last year and are anticipating a similar year this year. So I think persistence is at the heart of what we need to do. We need to have consistency of policy, consistency of funding, so that businesses can invest in a way that's clear to them. Having been a leader of business that's investing, you need to know what the situation looks like when you look at your business case. So you need some consistency. So I think that's the most important aspect from my perspective, and it's very pleasing that the whole charge towards net zero does have cross-party consensus. Okay, there's perhaps differences in how each party may get there. To Alex's point, there will be a few changes of course or slight adjustments of course on the way, because this is a whole new thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is consensus. It is about taking the population with us to make sure that these EVs or we talked a lot about EVs, or we've intimated a lot about EVs. It will actually be a very diverse kind of industry in terms of different fuel usages as we get towards net zero. It's important that they're affordable, that business cases for companies, thinking of hauliers for example, don't go up as a result of the transition in the mid-term, and that those costs come down for these new technologies as they get scaled. What are the USPs for the UK? Well, I think some of our policy is a USP, first major economy to have a legally binding net zero commitment. But I think perhaps more importantly, and Richard and Philippa and Alex have all touched on it, is our power of innovation. You know, the strength of our higher education sector, specialist universities in hydrogen, in battery materials, in renewable energy. It's this IP and the ability to scale this IP that will give us the competitive advantage, in my view.
Great, thanks. Philippa, quick question for you. What's exciting you at the moment? What innovation should we be looking out for that's going to come from your centre?
So really, I think the biggest one thing, or it covers multiple facets, but will be a great driver for the UK is the adoption of more digital tools within the system. So this will be everything from the manufacturing side of it, so driving down the cost, improving the efficiency of the way we're producing our vehicles and getting off to market to be more competitive. I think it will be digital tools in terms of how we're tracking the emissions and the embedded carbon. So we're seeing a lot of that from the life cycle analysis side of it and the sustainability side of it as we move from looking at just our scope 1 and 2 emissions to scope 3. And the challenge there is actually making sure that we do it in a way that is affordable for the SMEs to remain part of those supply chains. So that will be a big challenge going forward. I think also the optimization of the vehicle themselves. So we're starting to see now vehicles actually being developed for their new powertrain systems. So, we are actually getting BEV-specific designed vehicles, same with hydrogen fuel cell designed vehicles, rather than everybody trying to, just take out the engine and fill the gap. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity around the management of those propulsion systems. We're seeing it already in batteries, for example. You'll be able to tell which of the particular cell has degraded, and actually how do you isolate that cell, or how do you replace that, so you're looking at the whole system, so you don't have to throw the whole battery away if there's a challenge or if there's an accident. You'll actually be able to do that sort of forensic diagnostics on it to again make people feel more confident about the consumers as well, about using them. And obviously then keeping them within the system is really important. So all of this digital activity will add real value. And again, it's a real opportunity for the UK, because we're seeing multiple startups, a lot coming out of the university system, who are really looking at this and developing these technologies. And that's something that actually will drive out costs, but also improve our competitiveness. So a really, really big opportunity for the UK in that side of things.
Great, thanks. I'm going to wrap us up in a minute and come to questions, so please do get your questions in if you've got some. But I just take this opportunity to ask you all, seeing as we've got an election this year, we have a new government of some sort, whatever colour it is, if you could ask them for one key thing, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Alex.
Thank you. Well, look, I've shamelessly promoted our green report from January, Green Innovation. I actually wanted to subtitle that, Make Climate Boring Again, and I was not allowed to do that. But that's really what we'd like to see. We'd like to see there is a consensus on this, we think, and we'd like to see that reflected by the parties with commitments to deliver on net zero across the piece. We do have legal targets, we do have a watchdog, we do have fantastic innovation and sector strategies everywhere, and we don't want this whole topic to become a wedge issue in the election.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Richard.
well, I guess two call-outs. One is make sure that our policy is competitive globally. And I guess the one particularly around micromobility and ensuring that actually we can drive the pace of change globally as opposed to having to follow it. We deserve to drive it. We've got what it takes. And the other one is to ensure that we address this sort of scale-up issue, which I think has been touched on a little bit. Again, we have got some amazing innovations coming to fruition. We've all mentioned them today. There is a gap in terms of how you take a proposition and then scale it up to sort of an OEM requirement. If you go to the States, it's a lot easier to do and elsewhere in the world. So help, intervention in that respect, I think is crucial.
Great, thank you. Martin?
Political question, my favourite. So, in all seriousness, I think it's about maintaining the ambition. It's about holding the course and really delivering the sizable economical opportunities alongside, frankly, doing the right thing for the next generation around the planet. So that's
Thank you. Philippa?
I agree with all the other panellists, but one of the things that I think we've started to see in a much more coordinated fashion over the last, say, 8 to 18 months, probably slightly longer, is the government engaging more with industry about some of these task force and actually really listening to what is needed to help support this transition and this investment, because ultimately the government can't do it on their own. They need industry buy-in, and we all need to be working together to deliver on the net zero targets. So keeping that open relationship and keep listening and supporting where possible is really important to, critical material strategy has obviously been mentioned, but there's a hydrogen propulsion task force that's currently up and running, and again, that's a really important aspect if we are going to be competitive, and that's what we need to be.
Great, thank you. So I'll just ask a couple of the questions we've got through. Richard, how does NatWest manage the credit risk associated with funding new technology in the automotive sector, given many developments will be made by startups?
I mentioned before we're bringing new solutions out all the time to support this changing world that we're in, and we're certainly doing that. That was an IP-based funding proposition that's just come out. We're looking at new structures along the way, and actually also looking to see how we can, from a supply chain point of view, leverage the movements further up the supply chain, if you like, to help businesses much further down. I think supply chain, it's not been talked about much today, but it is pretty critical, and how that plays out. The SME aspect for NatWest is really important. We take it really seriously. It's a big part of our business. So, and that engagement, helping them through the transition, is something we do every day. We've got people on the ground, relationship managers talking to their SME customers, and understanding how they can help them through to fulfil the opportunities that are in front of them. There's no one solution. We absolutely have to be on our toes, looking for different solutions all the time. And we've just conducted a big piece of work actually under the banner of Future Fit, which will be published shortly. And that is very much around making sure that we understand what makes our clients future fit, and how we can go on that journey with them. So no one silver bullet, I'm afraid, but lots and lots of different approaches to adopt. You've got to be agile, as they say.
Thanks. And there's a question about most EVs are bought or leased by business, and residue value experience is poor. Should government provide incentives for buyers of second-hand EVs? I'll put that to you, Martin.
Oh, the wonderful world of residual values. You'll be unsurprised to hear me skip that, giving a definitive answer. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a sustainable marketplace where residuals will be maintained so that EVs are an affordable solution. We're at the early stage of market adoption. We're past the tipping point, according to many. Perhaps a little bit further to go in terms of full market penetration, or a more substantive tipping point. So, I think we've got to wait to see what happens with the market, and I'm sure future decisions will be taken as needed.
Did anyone else want to come in on that?
I think I'll just add something. So my colleague Chris Jones is on the 4 o'clock panel and could answer this in a much better way than I will. But I think one of the things that you're seeing is actually the challenge over the the cost of the internal combustion engines, and actually, you know, at the moment they are still a lot cheaper. So actually, some say it's not a balance where if we're trying to get these vehicles off the market, how do we manage it? And also there's this piece around educating the consumers. So this has been some great work and some great data actually done by the RAC Foundation, seeing that actually where vehicles are in service now for a lot longer now. They used to be about 8 years, now they're around 13 years, 14 years, so they're lasting much longer. And it's about that uncertainty with the consumers of what to do with their vehicle and potentially what vehicle to get next. And so the price is one thing, but actually, you know, having the trust in the vehicles and the trust in the infrastructure is one thing that really needs to be addressed to help sort of demystify some of this.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll finish there. We're at time. So thank you so much. Really interesting discussion. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.